Those are the things that need to happen minimally for us to communicate, for mankind to have come into existence and communicate with other beings out there. So you can see, we're going to have some fun with this one today, because I just decided I was just going to put down just a very cursory or crude assessment of what needs to take place as a thought experiment, just to understand what goes into life forming on Earth, or life having formed on Earth, and us discovering another civilization and being able to communicate with them, or what needed to happen and what still needs to happen in order for that to take place. Those three things: life forming on Earth, us discovering life elsewhere, not the probability of it happening elsewhere, but simply what the challenges are of communicating with them, but simply us discovering it and them communicating with us. Okay, so there are many moving parts there that need to be satisfied. So we'll say, before this happening, if we go back 10 billion years and you say, what's the likelihood of all those things happening? You'd say it's really, really tiny. But when you're looking at probability, there's a big difference between saying, I buy a lottery ticket for the lottery that's going to take place tonight. All right, I buy a Mega Millions, and the odds are 1 in 292 million that I would get all the right numbers, that anybody would get all the right numbers. So very unlikely. I wake up tomorrow and I've got I've got the winning ticket. It's very likely I actually have the winning ticket. So before an event, probability assessment is very different than after an event. All right. So right now we're just going to take a look at all of the things that needed to, say, 10 billion years ago, what needs to happen, and the constituent parts of consideration. And this is a very crude analysis because there are many more parts to this, but this just gives you an idea of the magnitude of what we would have been up against and we're still up against in being able to communicate with another alien civilization. First, let's assume a Big Bang or a singularity, and all the matter blew out from an infinitely dense point. The universe needed to expand at like a very precise rate in order for matter in the universe to even form, for electrons, neutrons, protons, all these to actually coalesce to form atoms and molecules. And it is theorized that if it was off by like 1 trillionth of a decimal point, some absurd number, if it happened too quickly, it couldn't have formed. The neutrons would never have come together. The gravitational forces and such in the universe wouldn't be what they are today. So we would not exist as we are, because matter itself would not exist, and certainly wouldn't exist in the state that it currently does. So now, let's say that all happened at exactly the precise rate, which right now we kind of are a testament to the fact that it did, if there was a Big Bang or something similar to it, like the singularity. Then let's leap forward to the actual matter of which human beings and the biosphere on planet Earth are comprised. Amino acids, proteins, they all need to form in such a way that they come in contact with one another. Right? Simply, they just need to be able to be in some kind of medium that allows them to come together. Right? Now, the primordial soup, whether that was some combination of water and other stuff in there, but let's just posit a primordial soup, but all these ingredients had to come together. But now they're inanimate, inorganic. They don't have life in themselves, as we say. That needed to come somehow. They needed to be able to replicate. But in order for them to do this, there needed to be an external energy source. There likely needed to be one. Well, we have the sun. The Earth is orbiting at just the right distance from the sun, that it's not too hot, not too cold. So this primordial soup and these different parts, the proteins, the amino acids, all the things that needed to come together, actually were in a hospitable enough environment for abiogenesis to happen. Abiogenesis is the idea that life could spring. Now, this is on the atheistic model, all right? This isn't a creator saying, I'm putting two people in a Garden of Eden and then they go forth and multiply. This is really an atheistic and even agnostic model. But abiogenesis says that RNA or something similar to it, if there's something unbeknownst to us, which gives the instructions or the blueprint for replication, that very basic cells were able to replicate. And they survived in primordial soup. And then, according to Darwin and his precursor, Darwin didn't come up with the idea of natural selection, but he certainly was the one given the credit for it, that through natural selection, these would sort of grow over time, and 99% of them would have died off. 99% of or so species have died off, but survival needed to keep happening, and natural selection would say, okay, you're going to have a certain part of you now that adapts to the environment. And over time, enough succeeded to where we humans are here. But prior to that, there was the hopeful monster theory. In the primordial soup, let's say RNA did happen to combine just so with amino acids and proteins, form a cell and lipids, and all those parts came together. And now we've got a single cell, but that's known as the hopeful monster theory, that there's just one at first, but and it sprang to life. How did it have the instructions or the information contained within it that it could replicate? All right, so that was another obstacle that still needs to be accounted for. What also had to happen is it not going extinct. Okay, all the species that eventually, let's say we got up to Neanderthals and Homo sapiens and all, there had to be enough of a geographical diversity such that if something really bad happened on planet Earth, we could survive it. Enough people could survive it to maintain the species or that particular species, and then through natural selection and adaptation, that would eventually result in mankind as we exist today. But through time, we needed to grow a big enough brain, because intelligence, so-called, is required to produce the radios and radio signals to communicate with extraterrestrial beings. So all that, let's just say, happened because we're already trying to communicate with beings outside of our solar system, right? So now we're going to try to communicate with those outsiders. Now, the radio signals were invented in the very late 1800s. So for, let's just say, roughly 130 years, if we had launched a radio signal out into outer space at the speed of light, the distance is only 130 light years that another civilization could possibly know that we exist, assuming their technology is similar to ours. Now, the Milky Way galaxy is roughly 100,000 light years across. We've been sending radio signals out there for roughly 130 years. So roughly 0.1% of the distance of the Milky Way galaxy, the signals have been going out. Now, there are so many galaxies out there that just don't even know of our existence. Most of the stars within the Milky Way galaxy have no clue of our existence if we consider the speed of light being the limiting factor. Now, some other civilization may have discovered a way to time travel, but we can only work with what we currently know. So let's say within those 130 years, there is another civilization out there. They need to have apparatus that is very similar to what we produce here on Earth. So they need to have radio receivers that can process that information. They may not have developed as a civilization, whether they're more advanced than us or less advanced than us, but let's assume they are at least as advanced as us. They needed to have the same dynamic or a similar enough dynamic to where they came up with radio receivers and people or whatever they may be, beings looking for patterns in the interstellar noise that's out there. So that needs to happen. They may have equipment out there, but it may not be attuned to radio signals. It may be some other type of signals that they are attuned to. So our signals could just blow right past them. But then let's say they have the radio receptors that can process it. Well, then they need to send back a radio signal to us at the limiting speed of light. So let's say they're 50 years away from us. Okay? Let's say there's a planet and there's a civilization out there that has got life and radio signals. It's going to take 50 years for that radio signal to get back to us, assuming the limiting and relatively slow speed of light. To us, the speed of light is fast. It circles the globe, the distance roughly 7.5 times per second. That's 186,000 miles per second. Space is so vast that the speed of light is just extraordinarily slow for the purposes of what we're looking to do. But nonetheless, those are the things that need to happen minimally for us to communicate, for mankind to have come into existence and communicate with other beings out there. So you can see, you can assign the probabilities that you want. How would you even come up with a number, a probability that says, what is the probability that another civilization has radio signal capability? It's such a broad range, and your input variables are going to be all over the map. But it's still fun to say, okay, there's a lot to think about. If this happens, the odds, so to speak, were absolutely against it happening. But the beautiful thing about things happening is that the things that actually happen say a whole lot more, in a sense, about the number of things that didn't happen. Because there may have been life on some other planet that they were working on radio signals, but something went wrong and it never happened, for example. Or a planet wasn't orbiting close enough to its sun, or it's in a double star system and the planet is on the other side of two stars and those signals can't get through. I don't know. You could assign your own variables to these things, but one thing is for sure is based on how our human minds are constructed. These are very, 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 very unlikely events to happen. So if they happen, you'll know that we've overcome a lot of odds being against it happening, and it happens. So if we hit the lottery and we have that winning ticket, we can say, hey, we're the survivors. We did it, and these events happened, and it's pretty cool. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Leave your thoughts. See you on another video, and keep thinking philosophically.